customer management, employee management, invoices, orders, contracts, reports, email, surveys, tasks, inventory. These are just 10 of the different features you might find in a total business management platform. And if you're looking to build a custom business management app with features like these completely without code, this video will show you how. We're going to start by looking at two examples of existing all-in-one business solutions so you can get a better understanding of the category of app that we're going to be talking about in this video. The first here is Zoho One. So you can see that they've described their product here as the operating system for business. And what they offer are a number of different applications that are seamlessly connected with one another so that you can run your business without missing a beat, right? You're not having to cobble together systems from completely different service providers. Everything is under one roof. I'm going to head over to their unified applications page here so we can get an even better sense of the types of functionality this platform offers. So you can see they've organized them by common business categories. This is exactly the type of app that we're talking about here. A system that can cover all of these different common functions that any business needs, right? Regardless of the industry, to run all of their operations smoothly. So you have sales related features, right? Managing your contacts, appointment scheduling if that applies to you, marketing, really handy to have these capabilities so that you can market your business without being reliant on some other external system. Oftentimes information that you collect from these marketing tools, such as surveys and forms, need to eventually feed back into your internal system. So again, having them all in one place can make that a lot easier. Looking at our next example here, this is FreshBooks, and this one's a little bit more focused on accounting specific features. But even within that subcategory, we can see that things can be broken down into modules as well, right? Taking your estimates and your proposals all the way to getting paid and reporting on all of these things. The alternative to a unified system like this would be to combine your DocuSign PDFs, for example, with your QuickBooks systems. And that immediately means that you're having to cobble together two external systems with one another so that you have data synced across both places, which can very easily get more complicated. It can add more time to your overall operations flow. So again, all-in-one solution like this means that you can automate data much more easily here. So just kind of scrolling down to get a better picture of the types of features that an accounting focused solution looks like, right? They cover invoicing, actual payment functionality, right, to process payments, and then all of the reporting features so that you can get insights you need to make important decisions about the business, right? Here are all of the different categories that they offer. This also includes things like, managing the clients that you might be billing, time tracking, mileage tracking, even team management for internal employees. All of those things are still very necessary, even if the application is much more focused on the financials aspect of it, right? And you can see that they market this system for businesses of all different sizes, okay? So this is the type of application that we're talking about. Now, I have to stress that this type of application can get really complex really fast because you're essentially putting together multiple mini apps into one larger application. It's really important you approach this with a strategy in place, right? You want to create a roadmap so that you can identify the most important features you want to tackle first, right? Leave the less important ones for later iterations of the application. Doesn't mean that you're not going to build them, it's just that you're not going to build them now. I can't tell you how important it is to keep your initial versions more slim than not. You're going to learn a lot as you go through the development of those features. So the last thing you want to do is waste time building way more than you need only to have to rework everything. You're just going to create extra work for yourself long term and delay your launch of your application. So take the time to put together a realistic roadmap where you can prioritize your features and not fall into scope creep. All right, so now that we have some context, I'm going to walk you through an example application we've started to put together in Bubble, completely without code, so that as we go through each of the different points of technique and strategy for addressing this type of application, we can see some of this in action here. Again, this is all built without code on Bubble. So in our application, we've broken things down into four primary feature sets: contacts, inventory, orders, and invoices. So starting with the contacts, this is acting as our CRM, right? So we have a table of contacts that we've created for the business. Every contact is going to have a specific type. So we sort of of categorize them. They're either a customer or a vendor. These options are completely customizable. We can add as many of those choices as we want. Notice that I have a functioning new contact button here. It'll open up a new line and I can start to create a new person. Let's say Jane Doe, and we're going to make Jane Doe an active contact, give her an email. We'll say jane@sample.com and also a phone number. And you'll see that there's also a sales total here where, you know, as the contact or client advances through different orders and they start to make payments, we can have some calculations happening. That way we can see, you know, how valuable this particular contact is. Now, again, this is really just the start of a CRM type of system you can have within the larger app. The point here is that you're managing a specific type of data and we're displaying that data through a table. Now, of course, you can design a form that is outside of the table with many more properties you can edit. You'll notice that we've designed this where we can edit things in line. So if I wanted to modify Jane's name to Sally, for example, then it'll update that behind the scenes immediately, right? So this is our kind of contact manager, just kind of the beginnings of getting things started. So now I'm going to go over to the inventory section of our application. This is actually navigating us to a completely different page in the app, and you'll see that the design is very similar to the contacts. Now, I could have designed this completely differently if I wanted. Something that we're trying to be mindful of here is making the designs very consistent and easy to work with, very user-friendly, right? We want things to be more predictable for the user than not, so that it's easy to navigate. So, you know, at the end of the day, it's still just another data set that we're working with, and we know that there are going to be multiple products for the business, so another table here makes sense. So if I create a new product, again, here it opens up a line. I can type in my new product name, choose the status. Notice that we took the design of this a couple steps further, right? Every status is now going to have its own color to make it easier to identify. Those colors can be carried throughout the application anywhere we may see kind of summaries or analytics reports of products by status, for example. Just makes it a little bit visually easier to identify things. All of these different, you know, features and notifications and kind of visual cues for the user are completely customizable. It's just dependent on what you need the application to do. So here, if I change the quantity of the cameras to, let's say, 5, you can see that my status automatically updated to, hey, you have to restock this. And this is also highlighted in this orange color to say, hey, you're really low on your on the quantity of this item. You need to reorder it for your inventory. We can also modify the base price of the product here. All right, so now I'm going to go over to the orders section. This is yet another page in our application called orders. And this is really following the next kind of natural step in our business's workflow, right? We've identified the contacts, we've defined who they are, we've also created all of our products. Now, an order is combining a contact with a product to set up a custom order for them. So here we have another table to manage this third data set. So I'm going to click on new order. We can see a new line comes up. We have a couple of defaults defined for us already. The status is by default going to start us out in draft. We have many different options here. Again, these are custom defined by us. We have control over these choices, and we're going to default the number of items to a quantity of 1. I can always change that. So let's say that I want to order a camera, or I want to create an order for the camera product, and we're going to assign this to the Jane@sample.com customer. Right, that camera was $100. That's one of the products in our inventory. Let's say Jane actually wants to purchase 2 cameras. You can see the total has automatically calculated here. Let's give Jane another product. So we're going to create another order for a jacket like this, and Jane will have 1 jacket there. So from here, what I can do is select both of these items. And now you see this conditional button has come up so that I can take an action on them. Again, this is just a sample of what, you know, the kind of functionality that you can accomplish here. I can have all sorts of interactions that I can take with this table where I can select all, I can maybe change all of their statuses at once, I can search through my orders, filter them. There's a lot of other things that you could add on to this, but the first place you need to start with is your basic data management. Creating everything, being able to display the details, updating or editing details, and removing them from your system if you need as well. Okay, so this is going to enable me to go to the next step in my business workflow, which is to now generate an invoice for the orders. So I'm going to click add orders to invoice. My alert message shows up. We can see the status automatically changed. I also don't have the ability to select anymore because now it has been added to an invoice. This is just, again, an example. It doesn't have to work that way. So now I'm going to go over to the invoices to see what I have created here. All right, so invoices, we have some stats to show us how we're doing with the financials. So we have another data set, right? We have our invoice IDs. It looks like we mislabeled the column header here. And then again, statuses that are unique to the invoices. Okay, these are the different statuses that they can fall under. We have a mix right now of the data we have in the database. Every order is going to be tied to one or more products. So this one has just sunglasses. This one has 2 products, t-shirt and a jacket. This was the one that I just created a moment ago, camera and jacket for Jane. And here's the complete total for that invoice. Now I have 2 options for an invoice that's in draft. I can either go ahead and finalize it and send, or I can edit it. So if I go to edit, it's going to pull open a pop-up. Again, this is just a choice here. We could technically take the user to a different page if we want. Okay, so we have the individual orders now itemized like this. Now I can choose to remove the individual order from the invoice if I want. Let's say that, you know, the customer changed their mind, they actually want to eliminate an item, I can do that. Or maybe I change the quantity. Let's say that this customer actually wants 3 jackets. So it's going to multiply that and have this big ripple effect to recalculate the overall total for the entire invoice. And this is, again, all completely customized. We added every item individually here. If your, invoicing system has other line items that need to be taken into account, it's completely up to you to add those things. This is really all going to go back to the data structure, which we will be looking at very soon here. So if I were to say I want to give this customer a $50 discount, right? Maybe there's a coupon or some kind of offer. It's going to calculate that, $350 minus 50. We have our $300 subtotal, changes the tax calculation a little bit, and you can see everything has been updated as I make changes to the areas that are editable, right? So 309 is now our new total here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to send the invoice. I'm going to click on the button. And what's happening behind the scenes is it's actually communicating with Stripe. Stripe is our payment gateway that we've integrated with an API so that it can generate a true invoice that can actually process real transactions, and we have something that we can send the customer so they can make that payment. So you'll notice a couple of things happen. First, we saw that alert message at the top of the screen. Our status has now changed to open. You'll notice the calculation up here has also updated. And now our buttons have changed to view the invoice. I'm going to click on this here. And this is what we, behind the scenes, emailed our customer, is a page that the customer can go to see the invoice details, right? They can see all the information here. And this is also customizable as well, the branding of all of this. This is a Stripe hosted page to keep things secure, but they can go through and make that payment to pay off the invoice. And if I go over to my Stripe dashboard, we are in our test environment here, you can actually see that we have a customer created for this person. If I open up this customer, I can see there is the associated invoice that we just created, and we can see that it's open. I have access to the payment page from here as well, but we very much integrated with this payment gateway so that everything can be run directly from the app. And here's actually an invoice that we created earlier that you can see the status is paid. If I go to view that invoice page, it's actually the same page, but Stripe has updated the details here to show me that it is marked as paid. I can now download a receipt if I want. So everything I just demonstrated there, I'm actually going to take you through the back end of it all so that you can see how it was put together. This is going to reveal what kind of structures you need behind the scenes for your database, for your page designs, for your logic, and any integrations. Those front end designs were actually quite simple. There was not a lot going on those screens, but you'd be surprised how much logic and how many decisions need to be made even just to get to that point. So this is again why I really emphasize it's important to keep your scope of work, especially in the early stages, slim. You're going to have plenty to do just to get to the point of having an A to B workflow for your users. Let's jump into the data structure that is supporting all of the features that I just walked through. I'm in the editor right now for this application, and I'm in the data section. So what I've done here is I've created 4 custom data types to support my primary data sets. The user data type is always included with a Bubble application by default. These records that are created are for the folks who need to log into the application. So, this would be the business owner, employees, things like that. But I've created 4 additional ones. So we're going to start with this contact data type here. The contact data type is really the primary data set here for my CRM page. Okay, you can see that I've displayed multiple records of contacts in this table design here. So in order to save all of those different properties per contact, I have to define the fields. So again, this is the structure of the data type. It's not any specific contact record. So within this type, I've created several fields here to store their email address, first name, last name, right? Standard contact information, phone number. This field is a relationship to one or more order records. So this is a connection between one contact record and one or more. You can see that this is a list. Order records, we'll talk about that data type in just a moment. Status and type are going to be option set choices. So if I jump over to this tab here in the data section, I have several option sets that I've created to have these predetermined list of choices. And in this case, for this example application, most of them are just statuses of things. But you can use option sets for many other use cases as well. So for my contact status, I've created 2 choices, active and inactive. I could create other ones, for example, pending or no contact, something like that. I also have another option set called contact type to identify, the category of contact if I wanted to organize vendors, manufacturers, whatever it might be. So here I just have 2 options, customer and vendor. All I need to do to add a new option is type in here and I'll hit create and it'll add new ones there. Back over to the data type here, I also have another text field for a Stripe customer ID. We'll be talking about, integrating with payment gateways. And typically you're going to have these external identifiers generated for you, and having that ID saved in your application will help you make connections, help you look up information for specific records if you need. So we'll want to capture those IDs and save it back to the contact record here. This is to support, being able to send the invoice, for example, to the right person. All right, so all of these fields allow me to save certain information to a specific contact record. If I go over to the app data section here, you can see here are my 4 contact entries, the same 4 that we see in the design. And this perspective shows you in more of a traditional spreadsheet type of style, but hopefully you can see here that the fields that we created in the structure of the type have now created the columns, right? The column headers in a traditional spreadsheet format. So it is up to you to create all of the fields you need to support all the different properties that you want for that particular record. Now, moving over to the, let's do the product data type next, because in our kind of business flow, we would be setting up our inventory, right? All the products here. Okay, so very similar, right? We have a dedicated data type for it because we want to keep all of these data sets separate from each other. These properties will specifically describe the product. Now notice I have number fields here for this one. We've got a bit more in terms of wanting to do math or calculations for a product. So product is going to have an available quantity. This is going to help me keep track of the inventory. Every time there is a sale, I'm going to modify the available quantity of that product so that it's lowered by however much was purchased. And then we have a separate number here to indicate, okay, hey, you are low, right? Whenever this available quantity is this number or less, then we can create some warning alerts, maybe send an email to the business owner or whoever would be responsible for restocking that product so that they don't run out and end up having to, be sold out and kind of delay any future orders. Then we have the product name, the price, and then we have this status here, which is another option set, active, inactive, or restock. We have some workflow logic that will automatically update the status to restock if that threshold is met here. Okay, then moving over to the orders. This is sort of the next data set that we'd work with in the overall business flow. Here we have a quantity, which is a number, and then we have several relationship fields here. So the order is going to be tied to a specific contact, right? Who is going to be purchasing this order. So we've labeled it from the perspective of a buyer, right? Related customer. And then we have related product. What exactly are they buying? And then eventually when an invoice is created for the order, we're going to associate it back to the order just for, good record keeping, just kind of having these shortcut references. We do have this set up as a list here because it's possible that the order may be paid over time across multiple payments, and so that could mean multiple invoices. Our order is also going to have a status here from another one of our option sets, and then we have the total price. Moving on to the invoice, you can see we have many more numbers here. This is actually where more of the payment details would be recorded. So here we have a host URL. This is for the payment page that we ultimately create from Stripe. And then we have several fields here for all of the different variables to come up with our grand total for the invoice. What I found is that every application that needs to sell something or needs to create an invoice for something is going to have a variety of line items that are unique to that business. So whether it's discount, different taxes, add-ons, things like that, I found that creating separate fields for every variable gives you the most flexibility for both record keeping and calculating things, displaying things on the page, things like that. We have relationships to the customer that's going to be paying for the invoice, as well as all of the orders that are being added to this invoice. Then the invoice also has its own set of status options, right? Note that I'm not using one single option set for all statuses across all my types. The statuses are going to be slightly different, right? They're unique to that particular content type, and so it's better to separate them out so that we don't get any wires crossed here. And then I also have a Stripe ID field here for the invoice because we are creating the invoice using Stripe's capabilities to manage all of that. And so there's going to be an ID. Again, this is going to help us view it later on if we need, or look it up in Stripe and get extra details if we want. Payment status from Stripe's perspective. We can do a lot of things as long as we have the ID. It's really important to stay organized in how you label your data types, your fields, your option sets, and even the choices. Most of these things aren't visible to the user. They're all internal labels, but it actually does make a difference in how quickly you can move through your development if you have an organized naming system. You want to keep your labels concise, make things easy to identify. What's a relationship field? What's pointing to an option set? Things like that. Because if you don't have a system, if things are inconsistent and clunky, then that could lead to more errors, and it can just slow you down as you move through your app. Hey, real quick, if you're finding this helpful, take a look at our free extended workshop over at coachingnocodeapps.com/workshop, where we'll guide you through our 4-phased approach for taking you from idea to app. If you're looking for a complete start to finish guide, you're going to enjoy this workshop. We've got the link on the screen right now and in the description below for you to check out. Now I'm going to jump into the front end design of this application. I'm specifically going to call out decisions that were made for this category of app. Right. The first is that we chose to do this as a multi-page application. So if we jump into the editor here and go into our page drop-down list, you can see that we have 4 separate pages for each one of our main modules, so to speak, right? We have our 4 modules: contacts, inventory, orders, and invoices. And applications like this, these total business solutions, they can get big really, really fast. You can have a lot going on even within one single module. Now, our designs now are very simple. There's not too much going on. This is really more just getting started. But a total solution like this, where you're going to have these kind of big buckets of feature sets, is going to be easier to manage if you have things on their own pages. And not just that, but also navigating to them, creating specific permissions for your team, any employees that should have access to some areas but not others. Having things on separate pages can make it easier to create those restrictions. So that's sort of the first decision, was that this is being built as a multi-page. Now, because it's a multi-page, we're also using a reusable element to manage our header, right? Our menu here. This is a standalone element, you can see here, header, which we've designed so that we can place instances of it, essentially copies of this design and its workflows, onto each one of our 4 pages. This way we only need to manage one element at a time, right? One header design. And any changes that we might want to make, we do it from one place and it will reflect automatically everywhere. For example, I'm going to show you real quick here just the header itself. I'm going to give it a quick background color like this. We're just going to make it very obvious, just this red. And if I refresh the page here, I'm on the CRM page, you can see it has that red background. If I jump over to inventory, it also has that red background, right? I only needed to make that adjustment once and it reflects everywhere because on the pages, I've added instances of this reusable element. So that's definitely a capability in Bubble that you want to take advantage of. Anything that needs to be global across all of your pages. The next design decision I want to call out here are these colors. We've kind of color coded our statuses. We've only done it for the products here, but you can do it for, anything that you want to help the user kind of easily identify the statuses when they're scanning, what could be a really big table of information here. We've added an additional attribute to our option set. This is in our product status here for this example. Notice that in addition to our 3 choices, I've also added a color attribute for these choices, right? Every option set comes with a built-in display attribute. That's just literally the name of the choice you gave it, right? That's the display. But I've created a custom attribute. You can kind of think of it like adding a field to a data type, right? An attribute to an option set. And I've called it color. This is just a text. And this allows me per choice to give every choice its own color code. So if I go over to the inventory design here for this drop down, notice that in the font color as well as the border, I've dynamically defined the color as the rows, products, statuses color. And so for an app like this where you may have multiple statuses, color coding things for your users can make it much, much more convenient for them as they're engaging with the app. All right, now the next thing you may have noticed is that for all of these different screens that we've created, our contacts, inventory, everything, orders, we've used a table element to display, these list of records in a very uniform way across all of the pages. Now, this is less about, having things look exactly the same because again, every app is different. You may have very different needs in terms of features and functionality, but the table is a great element to create structured displays of lists of things. And so in our designs here, you can see I have my table element this is for the inventory page. So this is my table of products. And a lot of really great benefits come from this element. You have a built-in header that you can design. You can make it sticky so that if I had a very big list, I could scroll through it and this header would stay in place so that I don't lose it, right? It's always going to be visible to me. It instantly makes it easy to keep your rows and columns aligned, right? I don't have anything shifting. Everything is perfectly aligned, in straight lines here, just like a traditional spreadsheet. The last thing I want to touch on here for designing a total business management solution is visualizing summarized data. There's a lot of information that's going to be generated, across all of your different feature sets. And so you may need to have some kind of consolidated dashboard, even if it's as simple as, these kind of calculated values that you have here, but something to help the business owner or any employees understand the performance of the business. And you may want to create a completely dedicated dashboard for those things. I'm actually going to switch over to a sample dashboard page that we happen to have in this app here. But you see how you can kind of extract anything that's in your database and manipulate it so that you can help your user understand what's going on in the business. So you can install plugin charts, you can summarize lists of things with your unique logic, kind of sorting things by a certain number or just calculating in general. We actually do have a separate video that goes over how to build a dashboard. I do encourage you to watch that if this is something that would make sense in your application. But this is all to say that, with an application like this, you will likely need to be extracting and aggregating a lot of information to help the user make important decisions. One of the key things you'll want to be mindful of for an app like this is consistency in your design. Application that has multiple modules and it's spread out across many pages can easily feel disjointed if you're not being consistent in how the menus are presented, how interactions behave on each of these pages. You want to take advantage of the reusable elements so you can create as many of those global, menus, footers, sidebars, whatever needs to appear the same on all pages Definitely take advantage of Bubble's styles capabilities so that your colors, fonts, the roundness, the borders of everything is incredibly consistent across all of your screens. An application like this can get very complex very quickly. So the more consistent you are, the more familiar every single screen will feel for the user. And there's less guessing for them to do. They won't be disoriented in any way. Next, I'm going to step through the workflows that I've put together to support all the functionality we've demonstrated to this point across our 4 modules here. You'd be surprised how many decisions actually need to be made just to get an application to this point, which is pretty simple at the moment. There are also functions that are happening more behind the scenes where the user's not totally aware, saving records to the database in a certain way, integrating with our payment gateway. So we're going to take a look at all of these pieces here. First thing that I want to mention is that for all 4 pages, since we're using this table element, we have inputs and drop downs that are editable, and we've chosen to enable auto binding on these inputs. So for example, if I make a change to Sally's name so that it's a capital S, or if I change Alex here to inactive, something like that, notice that progress bar is running across the screen there. There is a function that's happening when I make those changes. But if we go into the workflow area of this page, notice that I don't actually have anything being triggered by those particular inputs, the drop down or, for the status or the names input. What I'm using instead is a feature that Bubble has called auto binding. So let's go to this status one as an example. Here I've enabled auto binding on the parent elements thing. That's talking about the record here in the row. So we're in essence talking about our contact. And I'm going to auto bind the value of this dropdown to the status field. And what this means is that as soon as I make a change to this input, it's automatically going to save that value to the field without having to go through a workflow. Now, keep in mind, if you're going to use auto binding, you also need to set up privacy rules so that you can create an access right to a user who should be able to auto bind. So I've kept my rules very simple for my 4 data types here. As long as the user's logged in, they're allowed to auto bind on the fields that I've selected here. This is really helpful if you have a team situation with different levels of permission. You can leverage these server-side rules that will apply everywhere in your application. Now, let's take a look at the 2 workflows that I do have on the CRM page. We're going to start here. We're going to start with our new contact button. This is the blue button that's in the upper right corner. So when this button is clicked, we're going to create a new contact record. Notice that this is there aren't any values being saved. We're essentially just creating a blank record. And this is so that it can show up in our table immediately and then we can start editing. Right? So I'm going to click on the button. Now we have a new line there. If we go into the database, into the app data section, you see this new row has been added, no value saved quite yet. But as soon as I start defining these fields, so let's say customer, and we'll do Tim Jones like this. Okay, so I've saved 2 values there. We're going to have, let me refresh the data. We have Tim Jones here. Now I'm going to show you another thing. I'm going to give Tim Jones an email. Let's say tim@jones.com. Okay, this is triggering another workflow that we have. And what that did, I'm going to refresh the data again, is it created a customer in Stripe. And now we have a Stripe ID for that customer so that we can send them an invoice and it can be connected to that particular record. So looking at the workflow section, when the inputs value is changed, alongside the auto binding that we have set up for it, right? So it is saving the email address as well to that field. But it's also going to trigger one of our integration actions. So we're creating a customer in Stripe. This is an API call that we're running here using this inputs value, right? The email address is the only required piece that we have. And then I'm going to modify the contact. Here's the current row's contact to save the new ID that is generated from this Stripe step to my internal record, right? That's that text field that I have under my contact data type. So this is the result of step 1's ID. Now let's talk about this integration step real quick here. We are using a plugin called the API connector to make a custom API call to the Stripe API. I've added a new API connection. It's the only one that you can see I have in my application right now. You can see I actually have several calls to the API. We'll talk about the invoices in a moment. But the one that I've used just right now is the create customer call. And this is essentially just going to make a request to the Stripe API and saying, hey, I have this email address. It's a required field. I know that by looking at the Stripe API documentation. And so I'm going to send this request, and Stripe will create the record on their end and then send me back all of the details about the new customer record. Right? And so now I can use this as a workflow action here so that I can make that request at the exact moment that I want, basically as soon as the email is available. All right, moving on to the products page. It's our inventory page here. So we also have a new product button. Okay, and so when the new product is clicked, we're creating a new product record. Again, this is blank. And then we have one separate workflow here. As soon as the quantity value is changed, we're going to update the product to modify that status. And this has a condition on it because we only want to change the status to restock if this input's value is less than or equal to the threshold warning, right? So if I change, let's say the sunglasses to 8 or 7, I just typed in 7, then it's going to modify the status here. You see that? And that kicks in some conditions around the coloring and everything. So this way it's sort of a response to a conditional scenario that I want to make sure the user is made aware here. Okay, so now let's go over to the orders page. So we have a lot more workflows here because we're doing much more. Let's go back over here in terms of getting an order set up for an invoice. So again, we do have the auto binding and all of these inputs, but we also had the selection concept here. Let me add a new order. So with an order that is in a draft status, I can select it to add it to an invoice. Clicking on the new order button is going to create the blank order record. We've seen that a couple times already now. And now clicking on the select button, we have two workflows for that toggle back and forth between selecting and deselecting. And here we're using the help of a custom state. So I'm going to go over into my design real quick. When the button is clicked and they have not selected this particular order before, we're going to add it to a custom state to keep track of the orders that we've selected. That custom state lives on our main group here. Okay, we have a custom state called selected orders, which is a list of orders. This is a temporary value. You can see this as a field on a page rather than a field in the database, right? This value does not live in the database. So as soon as I refresh the page, this state gets cleared out to nothing. So every time I click select, let's go back to the workflow here. As long as the custom state, right, group mains selected orders doesn't contain the current row's order, then I'm going to update the state to add it to that list. So the value of our custom state is now going to be the group mains selected orders plus the current row's order. So I can click on as many select buttons as I want to add more and more items to this list. So, again, if I add another order, I can select 1, select 2. I have 2 items in my custom state, and that's actually what I'm referencing in order to display this count here. I'm just counting up the number of items in my custom state. So the user is very, very clear on how many they've selected. Okay, and then I have the opposite thing happening over here. If I click on the button, but the list, the custom state list already contains the order, then we're going to reverse. We're going to subtract that row's order from the list so that it removes it. Now I have 2 workflows over on the right that are addressing any changes being made to the order, starting with the quantity here. So if I, let's choose a product for this one line. So I have a jacket. Notice that the price of one jacket is $50, but if I change this to 2, it's going to recalculate it to 100. It's multiplying that base price of the product by my quantity that I have for this custom order. So this order's total is 100. So here for the quantity, if that input's value is changed, we're going to update the order to recalculate the total price. The order's product's price times this input's value. This is the quantity right here. Okay, this will ultimately allow us to create a grand total for our invoice if we add multiple orders to it. Okay, the other change is this search box that we have, which is where I searched for the product. So if I say, actually, I didn't mean to select the jacket, I actually meant to select the camera. Let's search for a different right here. You see that it also recalculates it because that changed product could have a different price. So it'll just take the new product's price, multiply it by the quantity, and there we go, we update the total again. Now, where all of this is leading up to adding an invoice, creating an invoice with those selected orders. So clicking on this button right here, This is going to do several things. The first is we're going to create a new invoice record. Even though we're on our orders page, we can absolutely be creating records within different data types. So first thing I'm doing is creating the record. You can see that I'm defining all sorts of fields here because now I know a lot of information by the time I'm ready to click on this button. Second step is we're going to then calculate the grand total. And I've split this out into a second action because I'm sort of pre-calculating the numbers I need first, mainly the subtotal and the tax, so that I can add them all together. So I'm taking the result of step one's subtotal plus the result of step one's tax. And then in our third step, we're going to update some statuses here, some connections. So we're modifying a list of orders. This is our custom state, all of the orders that we've chosen to add to the invoice. Now their status is going to be set to invoice created, where originally they were in draft. And we're also going to add the new invoice we created to each one of those orders list of invoices. It's just creating the relationship on both sides. For some cleanup here, we're going to clear out the state. We don't need it anymore, right? We've already added them to the invoice, so it empties out. And then we're going to show an alert message to the user to say, okay, you've created your invoice, and let them know that everything is done. All right, so that's the creation of the invoice. So now let's jump over to the invoices page. Okay, we also have a handful of workflows here. We also have more Stripe connections as well as a custom event that we'll be working with. Okay, so as a reminder, let's go over to the front end. What we have configured here for Logic. We do have the auto binding for the status, and we do have a pop-up here, another auto binding for the quantity, which does have a ripple effect in all of these numbers being changed for the invoice. Remember, this is now the invoice. And we also have a discount that we can modify that also has a ripple effect. So similar to before with the orders where we can change the product or the quantity, it recalculates. We're doing the exact same thing here, recalculating. Okay, so let's actually take a look at that particular workflow. So when this quantities value is changed, in addition to auto binding the quantity value to the field in the order record, we're going to modify the order and recalculate the price. It's the same thing that we did in the orders page. This order's product's price times this value, which is the quantity. Then we're going to schedule a custom event. This is just another workflow after a second. And I've added a 1 second delay because I wanted to give this action a bit of time to calculate properly. I don't want this to happen immediately and the numbers are off. So we want to make sure that this is actually calculated and saved first because we're going to be referencing that field in the custom event flow. So we're going to wait 1 second before it triggers this. Same thing is happening with the discount. If I make a change there, it's going to auto bind. I don't have anything else to do here, so I'm just going to immediately schedule that custom event. Once it gets to the custom event, we're going to be recalculating our subtotal and tax, and also recalculating the grand total of the invoice. And this pop-up is simply going to display all of those calculated values, right? These are the designs here that are just pointing to the invoice's number fields, and it's formatting it as a number as a currency, so we can see the currency symbol with the decimal places and everything, make it very clear to the user what's going on there. All right, and then our send button, which is this one right here, is probably our biggest workflow on this page. Okay, so we're doing several things. We're going to create an invoice, and then we're going to create an invoice item, and then finalize the invoice. This 3-step process is necessary according to Stripe's requirements. So the result of this action here will produce a URL for the user can go to so that they can see the invoice on the web. They can make a payment online, things like that. And we're including that link in an email. So here we're going to send an email. This is just a regular bubble email action. We're going to find the customer's email address by going to the Rose Invoices customer's email address, right? We can fill out all these details here. But ultimately, I just want to share that hosted invoice URL, right? And this is coming from the result of 3 here. We get all of this information about the invoice from Stripe. Again, this is an API action that we have in our API connector. So that'll send the email, and then we're going to have some status updates. So we're going to modify the invoice to say, okay, it's now open because we've sent it. So now we, on our end, we're just awaiting payment. It's in the customer's hands now. And we're also going to capture that URL for the hosted invoice so that we can open it up again later if we want, or send another email if we need. And then we're going to modify all of the products that were a part of this invoice. And update their quantity. Now that we've finalized and formalized this invoice, we now need to take that quantity for each of those products out of our inventory so that we don't oversell anything. The idea here that I want to kind of highlight and illustrate is the fact that you have multi-step processes that will likely need to occur when you reach these kind of important functions where a lot of data is intersecting, right? You need to pull data from different sources. You have your integrations involved. You have calculations potentially that need to be in here. So it's really important that you understand step by step sort of the sequence of everything and which records also need to be updated at the same time. So that everything is synced across your entire system. That's part of why an application like this is so valuable for a business, is that from one simple button click, you've updated many different parts of the system and things are more automated for the user. And it's making their life easier. It's bringing time back for the employees. And allows them to grow at a better rate. All right, I hope this was helpful. And if it was, the content you're about to see on the screen next will help you take things even further.